They say a mother's love is unconditional. But what happens when that love isn't returned? I gave up everything for my daughter, and she abandoned me when I needed her most. If this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. My name is Ruth, and I'm 72 years old. As I sit here in this sterile hospital room, the silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of machines, I find myself reflecting on the choices that led me to this moment of profound loneliness. The irony isn't lost on me. I'm surrounded by the very medical equipment that's keeping me alive, yet I've never felt more alone. It was 1975 when I discovered I was pregnant with Sarah. I was 25 then, fresh out of college with a degree in journalism and dreams as big as the Chicago skyline. I had just landed my first real job at the Tribune, working as a junior reporter. The newsroom buzzed with energy, typewriters clacking away as seasoned journalists crafted stories that would shape public opinion. I was finally living my dream, interviewing local politicians, covering community events, and slowly building my reputation in a male-dominated field. Then came the morning when everything changed. I remember staring at that little pink line on the pregnancy test, my hands trembling as the reality sank in. David, Sarah's father, had made his position clear from the beginning. He wasn't ready for children, and when I told him about the pregnancy, he simply said, "That's your choice to make, Ruth, but I won't be part of it." Those words still echo in my mind decades later. I could have made different choices. I could have continued working, hired help, found ways to balance motherhood and career. But growing up in a traditional household in suburban Illinois, I believed that good mothers stayed home with their children. My own mother had given up her teaching career to raise me and my two brothers, and she never spoke of it as a sacrifice, only as what women were supposed to do. So I made my choice. I resigned from the Tribune, gave up my small apartment in the city, and moved back to my hometown of Elmhurst. I can still remember cleaning out my desk, packing away my press credentials, and the half-finished articles I'd been working on. My editor, Mrs. Henderson, tried to convince me to stay, telling me about other women who had managed to continue their careers after having children. But my mind was made up. The first years of motherhood were exhausting, but fulfilling. Sarah was a beautiful baby with bright blue eyes and curly brown hair that caught the light. I threw myself into being the perfect mother, reading every parenting book I could find, taking her to music classes, story time at the library, and playground meetups with other mothers. I convinced myself that I was happier than I'd ever been, that raising Sarah was more rewarding than any byline could ever be. But late at night, when Sarah was sleeping, I would sometimes pull out my old notebooks and read the stories I'd written, the interviews I'd conducted, the dreams I'd documented. I would wonder what stories I might have covered, what injustices I might have exposed, what difference I might have made in the world. These thoughts came with a heavy dose of guilt. Wasn't my daughter enough? Wasn't being her mother the most important job in the world? As Sarah grew older, I made sure she had everything she needed and more. I worked part-time jobs when she was in school, retail, administrative work, anything that would let me be home when she got off the bus. I saved every penny for her college fund, often going without new clothes or small luxuries for myself. When she expressed interest in dance, I enrolled her in classes and spent hours driving her to rehearsals and competitions. When she wanted to learn piano, I found a way to afford lessons and a used piano for our living room. I was determined that Sarah would have all the opportunities I had given up. I helped her with homework every night, attended every school play and sports game, and made sure she understood the importance of education and following her dreams. I wanted her to be everything I couldn't be, to achieve everything I had set aside. The sacrifices seemed worth it when Sarah graduated as valedictorian of her high school class. I sat in the auditorium, tears streaming down my face as she delivered her speech about the importance of perseverance and the power of having someone believe in you. She looked directly at me during that speech, and I felt that every choice I'd made had been vindicated. Sarah chose to attend Northwestern University, studying business administration. It was expensive, but I had saved diligently, and I was proud to tell her she wouldn't need to worry about student loans. She could focus entirely on her studies and building her future. During her college years, I noticed the first signs of the distance that would eventually grow between us. Phone calls became shorter and less frequent. When she came home for holidays, she seemed restless, eager to return to her new life. I told myself this was natural. She was becoming independent, finding her own way in the world. Isn't that what every parent wants for their child? After graduation, Sarah moved to New York City for a job at a prestigious marketing firm. She was living her dream, climbing the corporate ladder, making the kind of money I could never have imagined. I was proud of her success, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming increasingly irrelevant in her life. Our conversations became purely functional. She would call every few weeks, asking about my health, updating me on her job, but there was no real connection. When I tried to share stories about my day, about the neighbors, about the small joys and concerns of my life, I could hear the impatience in her voice. She was busy, important, moving in circles I couldn't understand. I began to realize that in raising Sarah to be independent and successful, I had failed to teach her about loyalty, about the importance of family bonds, about gratitude for the sacrifices others make. Or perhaps I had taught her too well to pursue her own dreams, and she couldn't understand why I had given up mine. The years passed quickly. Sarah got promoted, moved to a bigger apartment, started dating a lawyer named Michael. I learned about these developments through brief phone calls and the occasional photo she would text me. I wasn't invited to meet Michael until they had been dating for over a year, and even then, it was a rushed dinner when they were in Chicago for a business conference. I could see that Sarah was ashamed of me. Not maliciously, but in the way successful people sometimes feel about their modest backgrounds. My small house in Elmhurst, my simple clothes, my lack of sophistication, these things seemed to embarrass her. She would change the subject when I asked about her work, as if she couldn't explain her world to someone like me. When Sarah announced her engagement to Michael, I offered to help plan the wedding. I had imagined this moment for years, mother and daughter working together to create the perfect day. But Sarah had already hired a wedding planner, chosen the venue, and made most of the decisions. My role was simply to show up and smile. The wedding was beautiful, but cold. Held at an expensive hotel in Manhattan, it was attended by Sarah's colleagues and Michael's family and friends. I knew almost no one there. I sat at a table with distant relatives I hadn't seen in years, watching my daughter celebrate the most important day of her life with people who had known her for a fraction of the time I had. During the mother-daughter dance, Sarah dutifully swayed with me to a song I didn't recognize. I tried to tell her how proud I was, how beautiful she looked, how much I loved her. She smiled and nodded, but her eyes were already searching the room for more important people to acknowledge. After the wedding, Sarah's calls became even less frequent. She and Michael were building their life together, and I was increasingly excluded from it. They bought a beautiful house in Westchester, and I was invited to visit exactly once. Sarah gave me a brief tour, but it was clear that I was an obligation, not a welcome guest. I tried to fill my days with activities and volunteer work. I joined the local historical society, helped at the church food bank, and took up gardening. But the silence in my house was deafening. I would catch myself setting 2 plates for dinner, forgetting that I was alone. I would pick up the phone to call Sarah, then put it down, knowing that I would be interrupting something more important. The hardest part was watching other mothers with their adult children. At the grocery store, I would see women my age shopping with their daughters, laughing together, clearly enjoying each other's company. At church, I would listen to friends talk about their children visiting for weekends, about family dinners and holiday traditions that continued into the next generation. I began to question every choice I had made. Had I been too devoted, too sacrificing? Had I failed to teach Sarah about gratitude and family loyalty? Or had I simply loved her too much, giving her everything she wanted without teaching her about reciprocity and responsibility? As I entered my 60s, my health began to decline. Nothing serious at first, just the usual aches and pains of aging, blood pressure medication, the occasional doctor's visit. I mentioned these things to Sarah during our increasingly rare phone calls, but she seemed to view them as normal parts of aging, not cause for concern or increased contact. When I was diagnosed with diabetes at 68, I called Sarah to let her know. She listened politely, asked the right questions about treatment and management, but didn't offer to visit or provide additional support. I managed the condition on my own, learning to monitor my blood sugar, adjust my diet, and take my medication. I told myself that I was being independent, that I didn't want to burden her with my health problems. The isolation became more profound as I aged. Many of my friends had passed away or moved to assisted living facilities. My brothers lived in other states and had their own health issues. Sarah was my only close family, and she felt more like a distant acquaintance than a daughter. I began to understand something that I had never considered during all those years of devoted motherhood. Children don't automatically become caring adults just because they were well cared for children. Love, sacrifice, and devotion from a parent don't guarantee love, sacrifice, and devotion in return. I had given Sarah everything, and in doing so, I had perhaps taught her that she deserved everything without having to give anything back. Last month, I woke up feeling dizzy and nauseous. I had been managing my diabetes carefully, but something was wrong. When I tried to stand up, I collapsed in my bedroom. I managed to crawl to the phone and call 911, and the paramedics found me barely conscious. The doctors at Northwestern Memorial Hospital told me I had experienced diabetic ketoacidosis, a serious complication that could have been fatal. They stabilized me, but I would need to stay in the hospital for several days for monitoring and treatment adjustment. From my hospital bed, I called Sarah. I explained what had happened, trying to keep my voice steady and not sound too frightened. I told her which hospital I was in, what room number, and what the doctors had said about my condition. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry," she said. And for a moment, I thought she might actually care. That sounds really scary. "Are you feeling better now?" I told her I was stable, but would be in the hospital for at least a week. There was a pause, and then she said, "I wish I could be there, but we have this huge product launch at work, and Michael has a trial starting on Monday. It's just terrible timing." Terrible timing. My near-death experience was terrible timing for her work schedule. "I could really use some company," I said quietly. "It's been pretty frightening, and I don't have anyone else." "I know, Mom, and I feel awful about it, but you know how it is. I just can't get away right now. Maybe in a few weeks when things calm down." A few weeks? I might not even be in the hospital in a few weeks. I might be home, alone, trying to manage my condition by myself, just as I had been managing everything else by myself. "Could Michael come?" I asked, grasping at straws. "Or maybe you could come for just one day?" Michael's completely swamped with this trial, and honestly, Mom, I don't think you understand how demanding my job is right now. We're launching a campaign for a major client, and if I'm not here, it could really hurt my career. Her career, the career I had made possible by giving up my own, the success I had sacrificed everything to help her achieve. "I understand," I said, because what else could I say? "I'll be fine." "I know you will. You're so strong, Mom. You've always been so independent." Independent. That was what she called it when she left me to face everything alone. "I'll call you in a few days to check on you," she said, "and maybe we can plan a visit when my schedule clears up." That was 3 weeks ago. She called twice during my hospital stay, brief conversations to check on my progress. She sent flowers once, delivered by a service, with a generic card that said, "Get well soon. Love, Sarah and Michael." I spent 8 days in that hospital, and I was alone for every single one of them. I watched other patients receive visits from their children, grandchildren, friends. I listened to the laughter and conversation from other rooms while I sat in silence, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I had failed so completely. The nurses were kind, but they were busy with other patients. The doctors were professional, but distant. I had never felt so invisible, so forgotten. I was a 72-year-old woman who had devoted her entire life to raising a daughter who couldn't find time to visit her mother in the hospital. One evening, a nurse named Patricia sat with me during her break. She was around Sarah's age, maybe a few years younger, and she had noticed that I never had any visitors. "You know," she said gently, "I see a lot of patients come through here. Some have families surrounding them constantly. Others have no one at all. But you seem different. You seem like someone who should have people here." I found myself telling her about Sarah, about the sacrifices I had made, about the distance that had grown between us. Patricia listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, her eyes full of understanding. "I have a mother too," she said finally. "She raised me alone after my father left, worked 2 jobs to put me through nursing school. And you know what I realized? She never asked for anything in return. She just loved me and supported me, and somehow I grew up thinking that was just what mothers did. It wasn't until I had my own daughter that I understood what she had given up for me. Does your mother know that now? I asked. She does, because I make sure she knows. I visit her every Sunday, I call her every day after work, and when she had her hip replacement last year, I took leave to take care of her. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I finally understood that love should flow both ways. After Patricia left, I lay awake thinking about her words. I realized that I had never explicitly taught Sarah about reciprocity in relationships. I had been so focused on being the perfect, selfless mother that I had never shown her what it meant to care for someone else, to put another person's needs before your own convenience. Now I'm home, managing my diabetes with new medications and dietary restrictions. I've hired a cleaning service and arranged for grocery delivery because I'm still weak and sometimes unsteady. I did all of this alone, just as I've done everything else for the past several years. The house feels different now. It's not just empty. It's hollow. I walk through rooms that once bustled with Sarah's energy, past the piano I bought for her lessons, by the bookshelf filled with awards and certificates from her school years. These things that once brought me joy now feel like monuments to a one-sided relationship. Sarah called last week to check on me. She sounded relieved when I told her I was managing well, that I had everything under control. She didn't offer to visit, and I didn't ask. I've learned that asking only leads to disappointment and elaborate explanations about why she can't be there. I'm glad you're feeling better, Mom, she said. I was really worried about you. Worried enough to send flowers, but not worried enough to visit. I wanted to say this, but I didn't. Instead, I asked about her work, about Michael, about the life she was building that had no room for me. We're thinking about taking a vacation to Europe this summer, she said. Michael has some time off, and I've been working so hard lately. Europe. She could find time for a 2-week vacation in Europe, but not for a day to visit her mother in the hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me. That sounds wonderful, I said, because what else could I say? You deserve a break. Thanks, Mom. You always understand. But I don't understand. I don't understand how the child I raised to be kind and compassionate became an adult who could abandon her mother during a medical crisis. I don't understand how someone who achieved so much success forgot the person who made it possible. After we hung up, I sat in my living room looking at the photographs on the mantel. Sarah's graduation, her wedding, holiday photos from when she was young. In every picture, I'm beaming with pride, my arm around her, my face glowing with love and happiness. But looking at them now, I can see something else. I can see how I had already begun to fade into the background, how I had defined myself entirely by her achievements. I understand now that I created this situation. In my determination to be the perfect mother, to give Sarah everything she needed and wanted, I failed to teach her about reciprocity, about the responsibilities that come with being loved and cared for. I showed her that mothers sacrifice everything for their children, but I never showed her that grown children have obligations to their aging parents. I also understand that I lost myself in the process. I gave up my dreams, my career, my identity, and became nothing more than Sarah's mother. When she no longer needed me in that role, I had nothing left to offer, no independent life or interests that might have made me worth knowing as a person rather than just a parent. The woman who once dreamed of being a journalist, who wanted to tell important stories and make a difference in the world, disappeared so completely that even I had forgotten she existed. I became a function rather than a person, and when that function was no longer needed, I became irrelevant. But something has changed since my hospital stay. Maybe it was the loneliness, or the realization that I could have died alone, or the conversation with Patricia. Whatever it was, I feel a spark of something I haven't felt in years. Anger. Not bitter, destructive anger, but a clean, clarifying anger that cuts through the fog of self-pity and regret. I'm angry at Sarah for taking everything I gave her and offering nothing in return. I'm angry at myself for teaching her that this was acceptable. I'm angry at the world that tells mothers to sacrifice everything for their children while never teaching children to honor those sacrifices. But more than anger, I feel something I haven't felt in decades: determination. The same determination that got me through journalism school, that helped me land that job at the Tribune, that made me believe I could make a difference in the world. As I sit here today, I'm trying to figure out what comes next. I'm 72 years old, and for the first time in decades, I don't have anyone to take care of but myself. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. Yesterday, I called the Elmhurst Historical Society and asked about volunteer opportunities. They need someone to help with their oral history project, interviewing longtime residents about the town's past. It's not the Tribune, but it's storytelling, and it's important work. I also contacted the local community college about their senior audit program. They have a creative writing class that starts next month. I'm thinking about joining, maybe writing some of the stories I never got to tell, maybe helping other women my age find their voices. I've been thinking about volunteering at the hospital too. Patricia mentioned that they have a program where volunteers visit patients who don't have family nearby. I know what it feels like to be alone in a hospital room, and maybe I can make sure other people don't have to experience that isolation. Maybe it's too late to reclaim my dreams, but it's not too late to reclaim myself. I've been thinking about what I want the rest of my life to look like, and for the first time in years, it doesn't revolve around Sarah. I can't change the past, and I can't change Sarah. But I can change how I spend whatever years I have left. I can choose to be more than just a mother who was abandoned by her daughter. I can choose to be Ruth, a woman with her own interests, her own value, her own story to tell. The sacrifice I made wasn't wrong, but it was incomplete. I gave up my dreams for my daughter, but I should have also taught her about love, loyalty, and the importance of family. I should have shown her that being successful doesn't mean abandoning the people who helped you achieve that success. It's a lesson I learned too late, but perhaps it's not too late to start living it. And maybe, just maybe, someday Sarah will realize what she's lost. But even if she doesn't, I refuse to spend the rest of my life waiting for her to remember that I exist. I'm going to build a life that has meaning beyond my role as her mother. I'm going to create connections with people who value me for who I am, not just for what I can give them. I'm going to write stories, make friends, and find ways to contribute to my community. The woman who dreamed of being a journalist never really died. She just went into hiding. It's time to bring her back into the light.